A financial advisor in Greenwich, Connecticut spent a week walking client driveways worth $8 to $15 million each. She expected supercars. Instead, she found Honda CRVs and Toyota Highlanders parked outside houses that expensive. 3 streets over, a man renting a 2-bedroom condo was leasing a Range Rover autobiography he could barely afford. Here's what most of us assume. We assume the car, the watch, the bag, all of it announces success, and success gets rewarded. But something quieter is actually happening. The people with the most money are often working the hardest to look like they don't have any. So, why would someone worth 8 figures choose to drive the same car as their mail carrier? That question traces back to a mechanism nobody ever teaches you. Looking rich doesn't just fail to protect your money, it actively puts your relationships, your safety, and your bank account at risk every single day you keep performing it. My name is Alex, and if you've ever felt a strange tension the moment you bought something nice, stick around. That instinct wasn't paranoia, it was your brain picking up on something real. I'm going to show you why the wealthiest people in this country deliberately look poor and the exact 3-step system they use to build wealth without anyone noticing. Once you understand this, you'll stop performing for people who were never actually cheering for you in the first place. And that tension always starts in the one place you'd least expect it: family dinner, the envy tax. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. When was the last time someone's good news made you feel worse instead of better? Because that's exactly what happened to Danielle Foster, a pediatric dentist outside Dallas, the year she finally let herself enjoy her income. She'd been driving a 10-year-old Honda Accord through dental school, through her associateship, through the first 2 years of owning her own practice. Then she bought herself a Range Rover autobiography, black on black, and a Rolex Daytona, the one with the white dial everyone in that world seems to want. She'd earned it. Nobody could argue with that. Except somehow people did argue with it, not out loud, just in the small ways. Here's the part nobody tells you about buying something nice. You assume the people around you will be happy for you. That's the natural expectation. You picture the compliments, the good for you, the quiet nod of approval from people who've watched you work. And for about 2 weeks, that's exactly what happens. Then something shifts. Admiration, it turns out, has a short shelf life. It fades fast because it costs the other person nothing to give it. And once it's given, it's spent. Envy works completely differently. Envy doesn't fade. It sits there quietly and it grows every time it gets a fresh look at what triggered it. So the same Rolex that got Danielle 3 genuine compliments in the first month became, by month 6, the thing her sister-in-law brought up at every holiday, usually disguised as a joke that wasn't really a joke. Now you're probably thinking, that's just jealousy. That's on them, not on her. And sure, on the surface, that's true. But here's what changes the math. The moment your success becomes visible, you stop being able to trust the reaction to it. You start asking yourself a question you never had to ask before. Are they being nice to me because they like me or because of what I have? That question is corrosive. It doesn't just affect the people who actually are jealous. It contaminates your read on everyone, including the people who never had a bad thought about you in their life. Danielle told her financial advisor almost a year later that she couldn't remember the last time a family gathering felt relaxed. Every dinner had this undertone now, this quiet calculation happening around the table. Who's paying? Who noticed the watch? Who's going to ask for something before the night's over? This is the actual cost of loud wealth, and it's rarely calculated because it never shows up on a balance sheet. It's not the $68,000 she spent on the car and the watch combined. It's the erosion of trust in relationships she'd had for 20 years, relationships that used to run on nothing but genuine affection and now ran through a filter of comparison. Quiet wealth works as a kind of insulation against exactly this. When people don't know what you have, they can't quietly resent you for it. You get to walk into that same family dinner and just be Danielle, the sister-in-law, the daughter, the friend, without an appraisal happening in the background. The relationship gets to run on what it always ran on before there was anything to compare. And that protection matters because relationships are usually the first thing loud wealth costs you. They're rarely the last, because once people know what you have, admiration and envy aren't the only things that show up at your door. The human ATM problem. What if the very people you love turned into the biggest threat to your bank account, without a single one of them meaning any harm? That's roughly what happened to Ryan Castellano, a commercial real estate broker working out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Ryan closed a run of good deals 2 years back and did what felt natural. He upgraded to a Mercedes Benz G63 AMG, put a down payment on a place near Camelback Mountain, and didn't think twice about any of it. He'd worked for it. Why hide it? Here's where it gets strange. The upgrade didn't just change how people saw him, it changed what people felt entitled to ask him for. Within about 6 months, Ryan's phone started working differently. A cousin needed $4,000 to cover a car repair just until payday. A college buddy wanted in on a business idea and figured Ryan was the obvious first call. His sister's church group hit him up for a donation that felt more like an invoice than a request. None of these people were bad people. That's the part that's easy to miss. They weren't trying to take advantage of him. They'd just done some quiet math in their heads. And in that math, Ryan had plenty, so Ryan could help. And once that math sets in, saying no stops being simple. Every time Ryan declined, he got some version of the same response. Come on, you can afford it. It's not that big a deal for you. Which sounds harmless until you're hearing it every few weeks and until you notice that your own house is nicer, your own car is newer. So somehow your no counts less than everyone else's. Now you might be thinking, isn't that just generosity, and isn't generosity a good thing? Sure. But there's a difference between giving because you want to and giving because refusing feels socially impossible. One is a choice. The other is a tax you never agreed to. Follow the incentives here, and it makes complete sense. The moment your financial success becomes visible, you stop being seen as a person with money and start being seen as a resource with a person attached. People don't think of a bank as rude for having limits, but somehow a person with money who sets the exact same limit gets called cheap or selfish or worse. Let's actually run the numbers on what saying yes costs Ryan. That $4,000 to his cousin, if it had gone into a brokerage account instead, tracking something like the S&P 500 at an average return of 10% a year, would be worth roughly $10,400 in 10 years. Say yes 8 times over a decade at that same average, and you're not looking at $32,000 walked out the door. You're looking at something closer to $83,000 in money that never got the chance to grow. That's real money. That's most of a year of contributions to a retirement account. Since this year, the 401k limit sits at $24,500 for anyone contributing through work. This is why the wealthy who actually stay wealthy get so disciplined about the soft no. Not because they're stingy, because they understand that every dollar handed out under social pressure is a dollar that stops compounding permanently. Ryan eventually figured this out, mostly by accident. He stopped announcing upgrades. He kept driving the G63, sure, but he stopped mentioning the deals that paid for it, stopped posting the mountain views, stopped being the guy everyone assumed had room in his budget for their emergency, and almost immediately the requests slowed down. Not because he got any less successful, because he got quieter about it, because here's the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. Family and friends asking for a little help is one thing. That's manageable even if it stings sometimes, but not everyone who notices what you have is asking nicely. The predator signal. What if the thing you bought to feel safe is actually the thing putting you at risk? Consider Angela Whitfield, an orthodontic surgeon who built a thriving practice in Naples, Florida. A few years back, she treated herself. She bought a waterfront home in Port Royal, one of the priciest pockets of Naples, for $4.3 million and parked a Lamborghini Urus in the driveway. She wasn't showing off, not really. She just liked nice things and she'd earned the ability to have them. Here's what she didn't expect. That car and that address didn't just signal success, they signaled opportunity to exactly the wrong kind of people. Within a year, a contractor doing routine work on her seawall quoted her nearly double what her neighbor paid for an almost identical job. When she asked why, he didn't really have an answer, just a shrug and a line about material costs. Then came the slip and fall. A delivery driver claimed he'd hurt his back on her front steps that, according to her own security footage, he never actually stumbled on. Her insurance company settled anyway, because fighting it in court would have cost more than the payout itself. Now here's where it gets strange. Angela hadn't done anything wrong. She hadn't been careless or reckless or foolish with her money. She'd simply made her success visible, and visibility, it turns out, works like a dinner bell. Think about it from the other side for a second. If you're someone looking to file a questionable insurance claim, or pad a contractor's invoice, or run a small scam, who do you target? Not the person in the 10-year-old Toyota Camry. You target the Urus. You target the waterfront address. The house and the car aren't just possessions anymore. They're a public announcement that says, this person has money, and this person is probably an easier mark than most. I know what that sounds like. It sounds like she's being punished for succeeding. And in a way, she is, just not by some grand unfairness of the universe, by simple math. Attorneys and contractors and opportunists don't spend their energy evenly. They spend it where the potential payout looks biggest, and a $4 million house with a supercar out front looks like a very big payout indeed. This is the actual mechanism behind something you've probably heard before, that the wealthiest people often drive the most unremarkable cars. It's not modesty for its own sake, it's asset protection dressed up as humility. When Angela's mentor, a much older surgeon who'd built and sold two practices, took her to lunch that year, he was driving a Honda CR-V. She asked him about it. Half joking, he told her something she never forgot. The richest people in the room are usually the ones who look the poorest because they've got nothing left to prove and nothing they're willing to hand a stranger for free. Yes, after the seawall overcharge and the fake fall, Angela made some changes. She moved the Urus into the garage instead of the driveway. She put the Port Royal house under a properly structured LLC, the same tool most seasoned real estate investors use specifically, so their name doesn't show up in a quick property search. Within months, the unsolicited contractor bids dropped off, and so did the strange, overly friendly visitors who used to wander a little too close to her front door. None of this made Angela any less successful. It just made her a smaller target, and once you stop looking like a target, you're free to actually focus on the part that matters, which is how the money grows instead of who might be circling it. How the actual rich move money. Here's a strange fact. A lot of the wealthiest people in this country technically own almost nothing in their own name. Take Devin Marsh, a financial planner who spends most of his days advising small business owners in the Charlotte area. Devin told me something a few years back that stuck with me. He said the biggest shift in his own thinking happened the day he realized his wealthiest clients weren't hiding money because they had something to hide. They were hiding it because visibility itself was the risk, and once you understand that, the whole structure of how they operate starts to make sense. So let's actually pull back the curtain on the mechanics, because this is where it stops being a mindset and starts being math. Most of Devin's high net worth clients don't own their homes directly. The house sits inside a limited liability company or sometimes a trust, so a simple property search pulls up a business name instead of a person. That waterfront listing in Port Royal we talked about earlier, the one for $4.3 million, if it's held inside an LLC, nobody scrolling through public records finds out who actually owns it. The same logic applies to the boat, sometimes even the car. It's not about avoiding taxes, it's about avoiding attention. But here's the part that actually builds wealth, not just protects it. Every one of Devin's clients who ended up genuinely rich, not rich looking, but rich, made the same quiet decision at some point. They stopped funding their lifestyle and started funding what he calls the forever fund. Money that goes into assets that pay you instead of things that cost you. Let's run the actual numbers because round numbers lie and specific ones don't. Say you're currently maxing out a 401k at this year's limit of $24,500, and you're also putting $7,500 into an IRA, which is this year's limit there too. That's $32,000 a year, invested in something simple like an S&P 500 index fund. Historically, that fund has returned somewhere around 10% annually before inflation. Run that for 25 years, and you're not looking at $800,000, you're looking at something closer to $3.5 million. You contributed $800,000 of that yourself. The other $2.7 million came from time and patience, not from any luxury purchase you skipped. Now compare that to the Range Rover autobiography we mentioned earlier, or the Lamborghini Urus. Those depreciate the moment they leave the lot, and they keep depreciating every single year after. One path takes money from your future and hands it to you today, dressed up as status. The other path takes the exact same money and quietly multiplies it while nobody's watching, including you, most days. Here's what changes the math even further. And this is the part Devin says clicks for people the moment they hear it. It's not just that the forever fund grows, it's that nobody outside your accountant and your advisor ever needs to know it exists. There's no social pressure attached to a brokerage statement. Nobody asks to borrow against your index funds at Thanksgiving. Nobody underbids your seawall repair because they clocked your retirement account balance. The money grows in total silence, which turns out to be exactly the condition it needs to grow the fastest. This is really the whole secret, if you can even call it that. The wealthy don't have some special access the rest of us don't. They've just stopped feeding two things that don't pay them back, which are other people's opinions and depreciating stuff. And once that money is quietly working in the background, the only thing left to master isn't a spreadsheet at all. It's a conversation. The 3-step framework. Here's a question worth asking yourself honestly. If nobody could see a single dollar you owned, would you still be making the same choices with your money? For Lauren Wickham, a marketing director in Charlotte who'd been working with Devin Marsh for a few years, that question landed hard. She'd spent her 30s chasing the version of success she could photograph, the Birkin 30 in gold hardware, the BMW X5M competition, the annual trip that ended up all over her Instagram. She wasn't broke. She just wasn't building anything either. So Devin gave her 3 steps, and she actually followed them, which is rarer than you'd think. Step 1 was about time, not appearances. Devin told her to stop asking what her money could buy and start asking what her money could buy back. That's the real shift between a consumer identity and an investor identity. Consumer identity says, if I earn more, I upgrade. An investor identity says, if I earn more, I buy back another hour of my own calendar. Lauren redirected the money she used to spend leasing a new car every 2 years into building actual income streams instead. Rental property, dividend-paying funds, things that eventually pay her whether she shows up to work or not. That's the real definition of luxury, not the car, the freedom to ignore your alarm clock. Step 2 was the forever fund itself. And this is where the numbers actually get exciting. Lauren committed to maxing out her 401k at this year's limit of $24,500 plus an additional $7,500 into a Roth IRA. That's $32,000 a year every year going into index funds instead of into another designer bag or another lease payment. Here's the part that made her actually emotional when Devin walked her through it. At an average historical return of around 10%, if she keeps that up for 20 years, she's sitting on somewhere close to $2 million. She'll have personally put in $640,000 of that. The other million plus is just what happens when money is left alone long enough to do its job. Meanwhile, that same $32,000 spent instead on a new BMW every couple of years is worth exactly $0 in 20 years because cars don't compound. They just quietly disappear. Step 3, and Devin says this is the one people underestimate the most, was mastering the soft no. Because once Lauren stopped broadcasting her life and started actually building wealth instead of performing it, the requests didn't stop. If anything, doing better financially eventually gets noticed, no matter how quiet you are about it. So she needed a way to protect her boundaries without turning every conversation into a conflict. The soft no's isn't about being cold. It's a specific kind of graciousness, something like, I really wish I could, but that's just not something I'm able to do right now. No drawn-out explanation, no guilt, no negotiating. Just a warm, immovable line. Lauren used it on a friend who pitched her a multi-level marketing opportunity, on a cousin who wanted a loan disguised as an investment, on an old coworker fundraising for a business idea that made no financial sense. Every time the conversation ended pleasantly, and every time her money stayed exactly where it was supposed to be, quietly compounding instead of quietly leaking out. Here's what's actually happening underneath all 3 of these steps. Time gives you the freedom to stop trading your life for money. The Forever Fund gives your money somewhere real to grow without an audience watching it happen. And the soft no protects both of those things from everyone who'd rather you spend it on them instead. None of this required Lauren to earn more money than she already had. It just required her to stop performing with the money she already made. And once you see that distinction clearly, it's hard to unsee it, especially the next time you're standing in a dealership or scrolling past someone else's driveway. The quiet ones already won. Here's the realization underneath everything we've covered today. The car in the driveway was never the point. The watch, the address, the bag, none of it. The real difference between looking rich and being rich comes down to who gets to see your money, and the answer almost always is fewer people than you'd think. A few things are worth carrying with you. Admiration fades, but envy sticks around. Visibility invites both opportunists and obligation. Money grows fastest in silence, not in front of an audience, and a graceful no protects your future more than any raise ever will. So next time you're tempted to upgrade something just to be seen, ask yourself what you're actually buying. Is it the thing itself or the reaction you're hoping it gets? That question alone will save you more money than any budget ever could. There's one more question worth sitting with though, and it's bigger than any single purchase. If nobody around you ever knew what you had, would you still be chasing it the same way? Let me know how you'd answer that.